So welcome to everybody. Welcome to you if you've been to an Agile Northants event before, and an especially big, warm Agile Northants welcome if you've never joined us before. I can see there's people from around the world. It sounds like there's that's one of the beautiful things is that about where we are at the moment in the world is it means that we can attract a lot of people and spread some of the great work that our speakers are doing. So yeah, fantastic. So big thanks to everyone who's made the effort to join this evening. So we are extremely fortunate and privileged to have Niels Malotaux here this evening. Just before we get on to the main event, just a few things we like to run through just before we do start our events. If you're able to and you're happy to, if you could put your full name and maybe your role, maybe where you come from, whatever you're comfortable sharing is your name in Zoom. It's really nice. It helps to put names to faces as well. If you could keep yourself muted throughout, it saves disruption if we've got dogs barking and things like that in the background. We do like to encourage camera on, so if you are comfortable with having your camera on, we always like to see some happy smiley faces at the events, and also it helps us to put names to faces if you've got your name on there as well. So please do that if you're comfortable in doing that. In terms of the interaction, we like to make our events as kind of informal and conversational as possible. So if you have got a question you want to ask as we go along, please either drop it in the chat feature, or unmute yourself and ask the question. Niels is very kindly offered to take questions as we go along to hopefully make this a bit of a conversation as well as a presentation. So please do that. And then after the event, a few of us will stick around. I think it's myself and Imran this evening from the Agile Northants team. So if you want to stick around afterwards to have a chat about anything about the event, or if you want to just say hello, or if you fancy getting involved with Agile Northants and organising some of the events, please stick around afterwards and we'd love to have a chat. So just before we get on to this evening's event, just a quick note on what's coming up next month. We've got Chris Stone back. Chris joined us last year when he took us on a bit of a guided tour about creating like custom retrospectives, and Chris is back next month on 50 Shades of Retrospective. So if you enjoyed it last time, or you're interested in what Chris does, he does some great work in the retrospective space. Join us next month, 23rd of August. There'll be some comms coming out, but you can sign up now. So on to the main event. We are really pleased actually that Niels has joined us. So Niels has joined us from Germany this evening. Niels joined one of our last events and we got chatting, and Niels kindly agreed to come and do a talk for us this evening. And I was particularly attracted to the line there. So too many developers feeding too few testers, causing a testing backlog of half a year. You can read the rest yourself, but it's something that really resonated with me and hopefully resonated with a lot of other people as well, because I know it's a common problem. Niels is going to do his own intro, but hopefully you get a lot of value out of Niels' talk this evening. I know I'm certainly really looking forward to this. So I'm going to hand over to Niels. So if you put a big virtual warm Agile Northants welcome to Niels Malotaux. Take it away, and I'll let you share your screen.
There we are. I hope you can see the screen.
Yep, we can see that now.
Yes.
So let's have a look. First, who am I? I coach teams to be more effective, more efficient, and more predictable. And all these things, I think after this webinar, you should already be capable of doing also more of these three things. Sometimes, well, mostly I'm asked when projects really go bad. Yeah, and this presentation is an example of how we turn that around. Sometimes I eat my own dog food because actually I like to design electronic systems. And the projects I coach are anything, because most of the things is not so much the technical stuff, but more human behavior stuff. What I coach is very short, quality on time. Deliver the right stuff at the right time. This was interesting. If you tuned into Agile Northants a few weeks ago, this was the title. So he said, guys, do you have a problem with me? So, well, they rectified it a little bit. They put the semicolon there. Help, we have a problem. And I'll be talking about it. So, one day I got a phone call at the beginning of February from a guy who I had been helping a few days a year with some organizational problems in his teams. And then he called, he said, Niels, we have a QA problem. I said, does that mean you have a testing problem? Yes, we have a testing problem. Okay, just to make sure, because most people, if they say QA, they mean testing. So I said, what's the problem? Well, we have this large stockpile of modules to test. Yeah. And this was the picture I got in my mind when I heard him telling. He said, all these tests have to do, the boss says, you have to do full regression tests, whatever that means. And he said, every regression test takes about 15 days. I said, okay. We have not enough testers. One tester just left the company because he wanted more money. And the boss said, you don't get more money. So he left. He said that the neighbor can get 50% more. Okay. So my friend said, Niels, should we hire more testers? I said, no. Just wait. First, let's see what the real problem is before we start throwing solutions to it. So, well, the senior tester was paralyzed. Actually, when I went there, this was the picture that I was seeing there. You can't see it because my picture is very small. Yeah, but he was just sitting there. So he said, can you help us out? I said, well, yeah, I think I can. But you know what he said then? How do you know? I said, well, I've had similar problems many times, and usually it takes about 1 day to solve it. So there's statistically a good chance that we can do this as well. But how do you know you can help? Well, I said, I have a magic tool. You recognize this? Plan, do, check, act, or plan, do, study, act, or whatever you want to call it. I don't mind as long as you do it. Yeah. So what people usually do is not plan, do, check, act. No, plan, do, plan, do, plan, do. I call that the intuitive cycle. I can't call it plan. It's plan, do. Yeah. What is the next thing we have to do? And we already do it. What's the next thing we have to do? We already do it. I call that plan, do. The intuitive cycle, how we automatically react on the next thing we have to do. Now, if intuition would be perfect, everything we would automatically do would be perfect, right? Not everything we do is perfect, right? Therefore, apparently, our intuition sometimes points us in the wrong direction. Now, intuition is a very strong thing. Yeah, probably a survival strategy in humans. So we have to recognize this and actively go against it. Otherwise, it is so strong. So once we recognize that, let's, instead of pull, let's plan. And plan is twofold: what to achieve and how to achieve it. And then we do it according to the plan, which is already the first pitfall. because the plan must be doable and we must follow the plan. But assume that worked then in the check or the study phase, we can say, was the result according to plan and the way we achieved it according to plan. If yes, should and could we do it better? If no, how are we going to do it better? And in the act phase, we're going to decide what to do differently the next cycle. Because if we don't do anything differently, the next cycle, the result will be the same, right? If we keep doing the same thing, don't expect a different outcome. Now, most people do some planning, they do a lot, and in the back of the mind, people know that maybe we should do something differently, but we are so busy, so we don't have time to really think how to act. So this is actually the thing that's usually missing. So instead of complaining about the problem, I call that stuck in the check phase. Yeah, they, it's always others that cause our problems, right? It's never us. So instead of complaining about it, my simple continuous mantra is, what are we going to do about it? Don't complain. What are we going to do about it? If the problem is not important, I don't want to hear it. If the problem is important, what are we going to do about it? We move to the act phase. So the moment you hear somebody complaining about whatever, stuck in the check phase, just ask this magic sentence. What are we going to do about it? And people like you are usually clever enough to immediately come up with at least some idea what we could do about it. So I was allowed to go in another country, about 6 hours travel. And we were sitting there, and you know that guy sitting there with that pile on his desk. So we went to a meeting room, and I said, where's the projector? It's already some years ago. In those days, not every meeting room had a projector. So I said, where's the projector? After a few minutes, there was the projector. And then I put Excel on the board, and I said to the guy, can you put some chunks of work that is in that pile in front of you? And of course, this is an actual copy of that Excel sheet. The only difference is that, of course, I had to anonymize the activities. So he wrote down what actually the activities were, but I had to translate that to in package 1 to 8 in this case. But because before I had been there to tell them how to organize things, so the guy, he prepared this, so he was very quickly in writing this down. And I said, now, how many days do you think you may need for this? Now, a lot of people don't like to estimate because they think estimates are not exact. Well, they are not. Who cares? The interesting thing is that if the estimates are in general, on average, good enough, then the sum is quite precise. That's simple mathematics. So just put some days there that you think you need to do these packages. And then I said, okay, these packages are quite large. So just as an exercise, let's take one of the packages and cut it into pieces. So he started typing, and after some time, he had cut package 8 into pieces, not completely. At the bottom, we said, well, that's enough for the exercise for the moment. Now we have some idea, 106 days, that's about half a year. So what was the problem? Customers were angry at this company, customers were leaving, so the survival of the company was on the line, because customers were disappearing because they were waiting and not getting reaction on their problems. And based on this, it could take half a year before everything was done. So I said to the tester, how about this? We will have the whole company at your disposal. Everybody is ready to help you to make your work easier, shorter. If we need the boss to do something for you, I make sure he does it. Now you can imagine that his smile already started moving up a little bit. Some people talk about empowerment of teams. Can you imagine that at this moment we were starting to empower this senior tester? So I said, if you have the whole company to your disposal, how many days do you still need as the bottleneck to get all these packages out to customers as quickly as possible without dilution of quality? It's still you're responsible every time we deliver something to customers. It works. It simply works and the customer is happy. Rule number one. Rule number two, use rule number one. So I said, put the numbers of days you think you still need to manage this process and to test something yourself and manage anybody else who helps you. So he put these numbers there. Really, these were just the exact numbers he put there and added about 47. That's about 9 weeks, 10 weeks. Okay. There was one junior tester, and just for a sanity check, I said, what's your idea? How many days do you need from developers? He put some numbers there to make sure that that wouldn't take more time than his time. So now we had some idea. Now, all these people who don't like estimation because they cannot estimate, they think, that's not the point. Without these numbers, you have no clue what you're talking about, right? It's just much. It's a big pile. With these numbers, coarse as they are, we have more idea about what we're talking about. And somebody can say that number is incorrect. Okay, now we are talking. Yeah. So, next question is, who is waiting for this? So he put his customer names there. I had to shorten them a little bit so that they're not that much recognizable. And I said, okay, interesting. So when, of course, we can say, how quickly can we serve some customers? So I use for this what I call the timeline process. Usually 8 or 10 weeks. Yeah, the delivery cycle, as we call it, is never more than 2 weeks. So I just put this picture on the whiteboard and I said, week 9 to 13, which customers are we going to deliver in which order? Because some customers may be screaming, but they never buy anything. So should we, when the company is on the line, should we work for them? Or should we identify the important customers who really are helped? Because there are some of the customers, they put their problem in 2 years ago. Yeah. And the moment we say, customer, here's the solution to your problem, customer says, yeah, that was 2 years ago. I'm already in 10 more other projects. So how do we identify in which order to deliver to which customers to most quickly make all these customers happy again? So I said, look just at that thing. And for instance, this was interesting. Question mark. I don't know who's waiting for that. Okay, so at the moment we don't have even to think about it. Another question mark. If we don't know and we can't find out who's waiting for that, why spend time on it? So I said, what's the first thing you can deliver tomorrow? So he looked at it. He knows exactly the contents of the package. Yeah. So he looked at it and he knows his customers. He said, okay, let's identify this one. Today is 22nd of February, 1 day of work. So in 2 days, we can tell the customer, here is the solution to your problem. So he quickly got the idea. So he filled in a few more. And then we said, okay, now you get the drill. You know how to do this. So now I can stop wasting your time because now you can do the rest yourself. Okay, so what was the result? We empowered the tester, smile, getting up slowly, and more and more. In 9 weeks, the whole pile was gone. The so-called full regression testing. So what is full regression testing? Yeah, we have to do all the tests we ever did for this product. And then at the moment I was discussing about that, one of the developers was sitting there. He said, yeah, full regression testing, everything. He said, what is tested is about 30% of the whole product. So you may, with full regression testing, test that part of the product that you didn't even change. So at that moment we said, okay, let's forget full regression testing. The boss says we have to do it. I said, I'll explain to the boss why we start redesigning the concept of full regression testing, if at all. Interestingly, because we quickly went systematically making customers happy, they were happy and amazed. He said, what happened suddenly at this company? And since then, there was no pile anymore. He kept up with development ever since. Why was the pile so high? 1.5 tester, 15 developers putting on the pile. But now he knew how to organize things and discuss with developers, maybe let them help if necessary. And he had this small whiteboard on his desk, and he took it to meeting rooms. That was his walking whiteboard, where he had always 4 weeks. And every week he redesigned what was most important to deliver to whom. That was his planning tool. 1 year later, I was back at that company. And they said, Niels, you know, when you came, all these companies were leaving our company, all these customers. And now, 1 year later, you know what happened? The revenue of the company went up 70% because of you. I said, I was there only 1 day. It was you who did it. I only kicked your butt a little bit so that you knew how to organize it. But you did this. So, 2 years later, Tester promoted the product manager and coaching his successors how to plan, to keep this knowledge into the whole process. So, just to explain a little bit more the background of all this timeline process. Yeah? The timeline process is there. How do we know that we get and do what is needed when it is needed? And of course, the Agile people want to say, we don't know because everything changes all the time. Well, that's of course bullshit. Some things change, I know. So standard projects, if they, let's call it a waterfall, they make a list of all the things they have to do, and they put some contingency, and then they say, then everything is done. You recognize that? The problem, however, is that the fatal date usually is earlier. And then what do they do? They just start working, and when the fatal date is passed, they say, blah, 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 and it's because of others. Yeah. Now, how do the Agile people do it? Well, Agile people do their best to deliver working software, and deadlines are waterfall, it's not for us, right? The only deadline there is at the end of the month. They want to have the salary. And then the evolutionary approach. Why is it evolutionary? Because with the ACT, in the Plan to Check Act, we introduce mutations in the way we work that creates evolution. So in this approach, we say, okay, if this is the deadline, this, whatever that is, surely will be done. This surely will not be done. And this may be done because estimation is not exact. And probably during the work, we will change what has to be done anyway. The most important thing is to get the most important things done, and the bells and whistles nobody could care about. Better have 80% 100% done, then 100%, 80% done. As long as that is the most important 80%. That's the principle. So, how did we do it? Remember how we just did it. We cut the work into chunks. We estimate. Takes very little time, no story points, because you can't add them up and you can't, well, you can try to translate that to time, but why do all the hassle when you can just estimate in days, add everything up, and usually what you will see, it doesn't fit the available time. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't even be talking here. Most projects get late, so usually it doesn't fit the available time once you do this exercise. We don't stop there. No, the moment we see it doesn't fit, we find strategies to solve that dilemma. We select the, to our knowledge, best strategy, and then we predict what will happen when, based on our current knowledge. And then if we learn and repeat every week, keeping the predictions up to date, predictions will change, requirements will change, but our prediction will be kept up to date at least every week. So, an example of another guy in the same company where we did the exercise, it was a one-person project. And he had, again, anonymized a lot of chunks of work, activities. He had estimates in days, and he already had been working when we did this exercise. So he already spent some days and found that for some of the activities, he still had some work to do. Okay. Again, having no numbers, we don't even know what we're talking about. Having some numbers, even if they're wrong, now we can discuss. So the first thing you can do is what's the ratio of the time spent and the estimate. You estimate when you still can miss ideas what to do, how difficult it is. You forget things you should do. And once you have spent it, you know what you forgot when you estimate. So we can see what's the ratio of real divided by estimate. And one interesting thing is, okay, these were quite okay, and these were quite different. 3 times as much as he thought. And the interesting thing is, then you can look at the type of activity. Is it just that he was lazy in his estimate, or did he just forget some things he also should do in that activity? Or was it something he wasn't so good at, so it took him more time to learn? So that already gives information. Actually, they use the same technique with testers in China for their products. And the Chinese usually had a ratio of 1. Everybody's estimate were always perfect, right? But sometimes they couldn't disguise reality. So we got 4s and 6s there. Then we looked from these Chinese, what kind of activities was it? It wasn't testing, it was design. So then we thought, okay, do we have to teach them design? Or do we have to hire designers? Or don't we let them do things? So this ratio already gives some indication how to improve what you are doing. The next step is the calibration factor. Don't start with this immediately, because that's just, I just want to give you the idea, and it's up to you whether it's useful to use this or not. But in this case, we have the calibration factor of 1.4. How did we get that? Well, if you take the total time spent divided by the estimated time for these tasks, in this case, spent was 1.4 times estimate. So let's multiply all the things that haven't been done yet with 1.4. We didn't use that here because somebody yes, thank you. Here we don't calibrate higher than 1 because that was just the rest of some work he was already doing. So we assumed that we didn't have to compensate for uncertainties there. Which means that this was the time calibrated that he might still need to finish his work. Now we come to what management is interested in, or the customer is interested in. Manager or the customer is not interested in story points, in velocity, in hours, in days, or whatever. They only want to know, when is it done, right? So in this case, what can we see here? We can look at, assume that there is some deadline at the 5th of June. Now this guy can say, okay, probably activities 1 to 16 will be done and the others won't. And if 17 or 18 is more important than activity 16, we can swap. Now we have something to discuss. And weekly, he could update his prediction. The earlier you know something, the better. So, usually, when we do this exercise, we see that we are not going to make it on time, right? Be honest. So what can we do if we see we're not making it on time? We talk about, in history, we can't change history, right? Whatever happened, happened, good or bad. Hopefully, if it was not so good, we learned from it. If it was good, we learned from it. And all we can say is from now till some deadline, what is the value we still can generate? And if what we think we have to do, because during the work, of course, I know we will change our idea of what really is necessary, but what we think we have to do, if it easily fits, we could just work. If it fits exactly, second line, we know it won't, so we better do something about it. And if we already see that it doesn't fit at all, we have even to do more. The first time I made this picture, this third line was extending beyond the fatal date. And then I decided, well, if the match is over, we can't score a goal. So I moved it, and it indicates that we should have started earlier than now. But the main thing that we learn here is, what are we going to do about it? Because failure is not an option. And the moment you ask those clever people working in your team, what are we going to do about it? They immediately come with some suggestions, and you can try them out in your next cycle. And at the end of the cycle, you say, well, did it help? If yes, what are we going to improve now? If no, what can we learn and do better? Now, there are many options that we can do. And the first 4 options that I'm going to show you are the deceptive options. They don't work. It's even worse. They were counterproductive. You may recognize them, hoping for the best. We won't be on time, but let's hope that everything goes right. Or we have to make it, therefore let's go for it. Well, if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. Whatever you do. And the more macho, the more errors you make, and the more time it takes. It works counterproductive. Then, is there anybody in the audience who works overtime? Well, because we are not live, I can't see all these things, but usually a lot of people do work overtime, right? Working overtime is fooling yourself and your boss and your customer. Because working 40 hours is already tiring. You make a certain amount of errors. If you are working even more than those hours, then you get more tired, make even more errors. And in the end, you only work overtime to rectify the errors you made because you were working overtime. Therefore, never ever work overtime so that once or twice a year, you have the energy to do it if it's really necessary. The work is full of paradoxes. People say, Niels, you say never, and then now you say, well, be realistic. Don't believe anything I say. Okay, the fourth deceptive option is moving the deadline. Have you seen that? Yeah, this is the deadline. Oh, we can't do it. Okay, we move the deadline. You know, Parkinson's law, people fill the time available. Okay, if we have more time available, guess what happens? We spend the time. And the student syndrome is the other side of the same medal. When do you work hard for an exam? 3 weeks before or the night before? Be honest. Yeah, all human behavior. So I was at a student project. The student project was going to automate some tool I was making. I don't like tools, but some tools may be useful if they're very simple. So students would make a web version of my tool. Well, after a few weeks of working, I got these 4 within 1 minute. I asked, how is it going? Well, we hope we can still be on time. Actually, we have to. And we work extra in the weekends. And well, we didn't finish what we promised that we would finish this week, but blah, blah, blah. So within 1 minute, I got them all 4. They are so strong, the intuition is so strong. Therefore, I show them to you so that you can try to overcome this. You can't work without them because they will be there. But how can we work still? So the 5th option is a dangerous one still, adding people. Did you ever have a problem that we had to deliver early and then let's open a can of developers, or let's open a can of testers? Yeah, because how do people calculate the time necessary? 12 person months project, 6 people in 2 months, 4 people in 3 months, 2 people in 6 months. Intuitively very strong, but it's the myth of the 1 month. You cannot open a can of developers or a can of testers and then work faster because you work slower. Brooks' law, adding people to a late project makes it later. Why? Because you spend time to tell them what they have to do. They have to learn what they have to do. So all this overhead makes things only later. And actually, Putnam measured about 500 projects that had been run already, so they couldn't tamper with the numbers. And he measured similar project size, but different team size. And he found that the cheapest project is 2 people. The fastest project is 5 to 7 people, but it's only 20% faster. Now, time to market is very important. So here is probably somewhere the economic optimum. If you go beyond 7 or 8 people, the project, this is the 9 mothers area. That's the area where some managers think if you want to produce a baby in 1 month, you take 9 mothers. Yeah. Other managers think I take 9 mothers and I make 9 children, but that's another story. So the thing is, if your project gets bigger than about 8 people, it explodes because then, sorry, I went too fast. Because then you have to pay more people and it takes more time. Well, in Scrum, for instance, suggest not more than 7 people, although I meet so many Scrum teams where there are 10, 12 people. And in the end, more people is more communication. Therefore, in the end, they are only doing meetings and don't have time to work. So how do you design an airplane? Well, probably you don't survive as a company, and only a few companies at a huge cost, they survived because we still want airplanes, but it always takes longer. So Brooks' law, you can't go around it, you have to learn how to work even where it exists and how to do that. Now, the low-hanging fruit, number 6, is saving time. We don't have enough time, but we can save time without negatively affecting the result. By doing the efficiency in what we do, why we do it, for who we do it. Half of the things we do in projects or in our work later prove not to be necessary. If we, in a retrospective, see we spend the time is already wasted. If we, instead of a retrospective, in a perspective, imagine that we do it and imagine that it won't be necessary, then we still can decide not to do it. And that's one of the tricks I use to do. Seeing things. Efficiency in how we do it, organizing it better. The product, the project, continuous improvement, and efficiency in when we do it, in which order. A lot of people start with the simple things, start working on the, which then turn out not to be that difficult. And when the difficult simple things, because based on what we just learned, we have to do them differently.
So Chip and Niels, it looks like your line's been a bit flaky.
Is it?
It's okay now. Does everyone else get a bit? I think you cut out again, Niels. I don't know if it's me to start with. I think it might be your line, Niels.
No, even I'm seeing that happening.
I think we might have lost him.
Are we there again?
Oh, you're back now.
Yes.
Yeah.
It says my internet connection is unstable. I hope it keeps stable enough.
You're back with us now.
Yeah, I'm back. Okay.
Hopefully it lasts out.
Efficiency in when we do it. Yeah, in the right order. I'm always done, and then I hope we still have connection for some questions. Yeah. So, and time boxing. Time boxing is more efficient than feature boxing. Feature boxing is waiting until something is done. And then Parkinson's law works to the maximum. So if I don't get a deadline, I make a deadline, because then we are more efficient, more pushed into not doing things that are not necessary. Continuous elimination of work waste. Ever heard of that? So the last one, even more important, is the starting deadlines. Because if you focus on a finish deadline, you will go over it. Starting deadlines are the moment that indicates the minimum time to finish the job. There is some minimum, like the 9 months for the mother. Every day you start later than the starting deadline, you already know you want to make the final deadline. So if you put all these things there, and here you see you already have a problem. So hopefully after now and all the starting deadlines, you have some time to move things, because you can't do everything at once. And this is an example of a whiteboard where we actually did an exercise. Here is some deadline where several elements of a product have to come together, both software, firmware, hardware, other things. And this is, I think, the last one. It's just what I was joking about today. It's just one element of what we call the evolutionary project management elements, or short EVO, based on plan, do, check, act. In the act phase, we decide what mutations we will do to learn to do better. Business case, requirements engineering, architecture and design, early review inspection. And I added to that project planning, a weekly task cycle, bi-weekly delivery cycle, and timeline. And zero defects is our attitude. We don't deliver defects, to the best of our knowledge. That is another talk. Business case is why. Requirements engineering, what, how much, and to know that we're done. Architecture and design, selecting the optimum compromise for the conflicting requirements, because what people want is always conflicting. So how are we going to do it? How early see that we did something wrong? How can we optimize the efficiency? How can we optimize the effectiveness? And what will happen and what will we do about it? Because failure is not an option. Right result, right time. That's why I call it delivery quality on time. And today we focused on one element, the timeline process. And the problem was solved.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Niels. We got there. Your line just held out. I was getting a bit worried then.
Yes,
But it did.
it can happen.
Great stuff. Are there any questions? I can't see any questions in the chat so far. Does anyone fancy unmuting if you've got any questions to ask?
Yeah, so the slides you can give out, you get a copy, but you can download it already from here.
Great, thanks, Niels. We'll make all those available.
Yeah.
If there aren't any
even about the subject is even a small booklet, yeah, where the whole story is also described.
What I'll do, so we are going to make the recording available on the Agile Northants YouTube channel, so that will be available fairly soon. But I will send out a link to all these URLs as well before then on Meetup. I did have a question actually, Niels, if there weren't any other ones. So the question I've got is around like buffers and padding that you might add. So I had a conversation not too long ago with somebody, and they were saying, we need to add loads of padding to these estimates because we're never going to finish on time. But I mean, my argument to that was, if we add padding and there's already been padding applied, you're adding padding on padding. So what's your view on contingency and adding should you add contingency? And where does that actually?
I don't do it. I don't do it. I mean, this is how basically, I do the timeline process. We start with bi-weekly deliveries, but soon people start delivering earlier, because why have your customer or anybody wait till the end of a so-called sprint? I don't use that word. So we decide which stakeholders we have to deliver. We are going to work in this plan to check act cycle, and then we deliver and we get feedback. And what we deliver simply works, but maybe the customer says exactly as I said, but not what I meant. And then we learn together with the customers. So what padding? Of course, I keep this timeline usually to a horizon of 8 or 10 weeks. Anything beyond that will change anyway. And of course, they want to know more. Okay, we have even coarser, then we start estimating in even weeks. And the moment you talk about padding, it gives the feeling of a certain correctness of your estimates, but you need a little bit because you know that some are not right. Well, we know they are not right. Some people complain about estimates are not exact. Of course they are not. They're estimates. They have nothing to do with exactness. It is what the person doing the estimate thinks it may take. That's all.
And I suppose the chances are as well.
No extras. We just keep delivering and don't waste too much on those technical things. Some people talk about Monte Carlo simulation as if they have the data to do that properly and blah, blah, blah. Don't waste my time.
Two things. Tom, you're done?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Niels.
Yeah, two things from me, two questions really. First is cutting the work into chunks. How small the chunk should be?
I ask back to you. In this case, chunks should be, I don't know, few days. It depends. I'm just listening to people, what they think they're going to do. And I ask them to make chunks, and they make chunks. And if a chunk is 3 months, I ask, okay, beyond 3 months, we don't even know what we're going to do. So how about chunks of 1 or 2 or 3 weeks or whatever, maybe a few days, I don't know. So it depends very much on the response I get when I work with people. Yeah. And in this case, because I had been there already, the guy, well, you see, his estimate 17 days, 8 days, 14 days, 11 days, 9 days. That was a chunk size. Yeah.
Okay.
It is more something that has to be delivered, yeah, than a chunk of all of the right size. And of course, this is the timeline. Timeline is the longer periods of time. Actually, we use the same process on the weekly planning. In the weekly planning, we plan 2/3 of the available time. We call that plannable time. And we fill that with hours. Yeah. And a lot of people say, Niels, with his hours and his days and his times, that's impossible. Well, if within 3-4 weeks, people deliver better results in 30% less time, well, I couldn't care less whether people don't like to estimate in hours or like it, as long as it works, and not even. So if people don't deliver towards their estimates, I couldn't care less. I asked people, just promise yourself that you do nothing this week. And all I ask that what you promise yourself is done, completely done, not to think about it anymore. So if you promise to do nothing, all I ask is that at the end of the week, you can say it is done, completely done, actually did nothing. Just to convey the concept. All I want you to be successful in your contribution to what we have to achieve. And everything I'm talking about is just to help people to do that.
Okay, great. And second question was regarding the estimate. Yeah. Now, my concern with the time-based estimate is it is very relative to the person and to who is estimating that. Okay.
The person who does the work does the estimate. Period. Because one person takes 2 days, one person takes 10 minutes, and then we can say, what are you going to do in those 2 days? What are you going to do in those 10 minutes? And then you already get different stories, which means if after some discussion, they start working more on the right things and less on the wrong things. Because 10 minutes may be wrong, the 2 days may be wrong. I couldn't care less. It's just the technique to get this out, to get the discussion out. Without numbers, you don't know what you're talking about. With numbers, you can say, I don't understand that number. Now we are talking. You see that the focus is not on estimates. Focus is on contributing to the success of the achievement by the end of the week. Everything else is just supporting every individual to add to that success.
Thank you. Well, people are still joining. That's
not everybody ran away. So
yeah, no.
no, we have.
Are there any more questions? Whilst we've still got Niels here.
Well, you can imagine my email if you can spell my name, Niels@malotaux.eu. So if there are more questions later, feel free.
Well,
Actually,
there definitely is a. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I have a question for the audience. Has anybody got any immediate application for what Niels has talked about?
Thank you, Joe.
That's a good question. I don't have a question of my own, but it kind of just to answer Joe's question, then have I got any immediate application for this? Yes, not myself personally as a test analyst within a Scrum team, but this, Niels, I hope this makes you laugh. So deliverables, so certain features that are going to be delivered for the rest of the year, for example, have been planned and put into a timeline for the rest of the year by upper management or senior stakeholders. There has been no conversation with the development teams whether they're actually realistic or not. They're pinned in a plan based on a strategic vision for the company. We want to deliver this to a customer at this point. We know it's coming to Christmas. We'll want to deliver this at this point. And it's very interesting to see the concepts around the timeline and specifically the start date. I think that's going to be quite powerful because we were all concentrated on we've got to have this done by a certain deadline. But actually, we know a couple of days into a sprint if we're not going to be able to deliver something, but we still plow on and still try and get it done. And going back to we go macho, we go, yeah, we're going to do it. But
fatalistic, macho, working overtime.
Yeah. So
I had this. I was mentoring some Scrum Master in Australia, and he said, Niels, management set another quarterly goals for the next quarter. I said, last quarter, did they also have a quarterly plan? Yes. And did we succeed? No. So what makes us, I never say you or them, I say what makes us think that this time we will succeed? And if I'm coaching a project and management comes with these nice fantasies, well, management also needs some educations, although they usually don't realize that. But then I'll talk.
Yeah. So
I see Maro raises a hand.
Hi, Niels. Nice to see you again. So my question is not a reaction to Joseph's question to the group. I'm sorry, I had my question formulated earlier. I'm a big fan, a big user of business simulations. So looking at the economic graphs of effort versus team size and there's many other analysis that Niels has done over the years, and a lot of his stuff is available online. I was wondering the following, Niels. Would you consider that it is part of the possible activities of a mature software engineering team to study and measure its history and collect data to produce custom graphs like the model graph you showed for ideal team sizing, so that they know what these threshold numbers mean for this particular team? For example, it might be that in a particular context or industry or type of work, the ideal team size with a given simple distribution of skills is not 3, but 7 or 9. Or it might be the opposite. It might be that starting from 3 or 4, it gets very tough to work in such teams. Is my question clear, Niels? Would I need to reformulate?
Well, I have a feeling that you want me to help collect the data to show something out of the data. And actually, personally, I'm not an academic. I don't like too much general problems or even collect too much historic data, because the next week we already be working differently. So what's the point in having all this historic data? Yeah. So what I prefer is to work with people, just like in this case, what is from now on we have to do and how can we optimize that? That's my personal preference, because then I feel really working towards earning our salaries there. Yeah. And as I said, personally, I'm not that much interested in general cases and collecting data and putting graphs out of that. That's Putnam who did that. And some other metrics people do that. But I rather generate metrics to use now. So, sorry if I'm disappointing there.
No. My question, that's very useful. I have a very different perspective, and I've seen different uses and advantages to these. That's where my bias comes from. And it's equally interesting to see, to understand your thinking about this. That's what I'm interested in, not the answer itself.
Okay.
See, yeah. So
still, we have the question from Joe. Is there anybody who could use this kind? And usually that means that there must be some pain. If there is no pain, there's no point in asking me for any help. or doing these things. And that's why people usually only ask me for help if there is a real problem. If there is a real hard deadline that they have to meet and they see they can't meet it. Like a few years ago, this space project where they missed every deadline, and then 9 weeks later, and since then they haven't missed any deadline. And instead of delivering their 40-person project at least 1 year over time, they delivered 1 day before the deadline, saving 6 million euros, something like that, 40 people for a year. Well, I think even more because they were very clever system engineers. So that's what I like to do. If people have the feeling they want to deliver faster, faster is something in LinkedIn, people say that's the wrong word. If they deliver earlier, better the right things, well, this is one technique you can try out yourself. And if you need some help, you can find me.
Amazing, thanks, Niels. Is there any final questions before? I can see a few claps, Niels. A few virtual claps. So there's a lot of appreciation.
Okay,
a lot of appreciation.
okay.
It's very difficult. Very difficult to express appreciation in this world.
Anyway,
any more questions before we close out tonight? I must say, Niels, it's something that I think I'll certainly be able to start applying. We have had a consultant in talking about Monte Carlo simulations, and
yes, interesting, but does it help you in making better decisions? That's the whole thing. It may give you some number. It may give you other numbers. But do these other numbers make you make better decisions? And is the improvement of the decisions, if at all, is that worth the investment in this Monte Carlo?
Yeah, because it is a significant investment to actually put that together. It does take.
I mean, I used Monte Carlo simulation in analog electronic circuits, where you can put the variations of all the components, and then build 1 million products and see whether they all stay within their limits. Because these physical products are predictable, and they have some variation. So then Monte Carlo is useful and it gives you useful information. But on this, I think it's just the consultant's trick to extort money from you. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think this will be good as well as a bit of an instrument for a conversation as well.
Yeah, that's the whole idea. Forget the exactness of the numbers. That's not even important. It's the conversation. So you just try it out and see what happens. Yeah. Take some project where you think, or a team who would like to perform better. Yeah, not management want them to perform better. That doesn't work. No, if they want to do something, you can say, well, I have here this technique. Let's try it out.
I'm going to give it a go. There's a lot of resources there, Niels. So thanks for that. And I will, as I say, I'll make those available to everybody as well. Great stuff. So I can't see any new hands. So I'm going to take that as no more questions. So I'm just going to quickly present my screen finally.
Tom, I just want to add that I've attended a couple of talks by Niels at the British Computer Society. So you might want to tune in there if you want to stay in touch with his, follow his work, his thinking.
Good shout. Yeah, I was presenting Niels earlier today. I've done the same. I've been to a few of Niels' talks at the BCS.
Yeah,
and you're still doing them, Niels, aren't you?
Yeah. So on my conferences page, you can see a lot of presentations I gave. You can see variations of the talk of today. So at BCS this year, I did the zero defects, how to move towards zero defects and things like that. So you can find some videos as well.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks again, Niels. Massive thank you for joining us this evening. Such a great talk. really great turnout as well. So thank you very much to everyone who's joined us. Some in the middle of the night. So special thanks to everyone who's not sleeping but joining us at Agile Northants instead.